Dusty was born in Biloxi in 1903, and she was born into a father was a banker. In fact, the People's Bank is the family bank still. She was precocious, very, very precocious. She graduated from high school there and at the age of 16. She went to Blue Mountain College in North Mississippi and graduated in 2.5 years because she wanted to be an actress. And she did graduate quickly, and then she went on to Chicago, where she did become an actress, and then on to New York.
She actually did some silent films, didn't she?
She did. When she moved to New York to be in a play called Topsy and Eva, she also began to get caught up in the film industry there in New York, which was very directly connected to Broadway and the theaters, and was active in the film industry. I think she had some time in vaudeville. Earlier, she'd been on the Chautauqua circuit. So she had a very active life as an actress in the 20s and met Archie Bonjay. Archie was an art student at the time. And in 1928, they married back in Biloxi. They stayed in New York, part of the art world, and moved to Biloxi about 1934. Basically, that's where she lived the rest of her life, and she died in Biloxi in 1993.
When did she become an artist? To go from actress to artist, that's a pretty big leap.
You're right, it was. She spent a great deal of time with Archie, of course, in his studio, but also in the art world of New York from 1928 to 1934. They moved to Biloxi, and Archie unfortunately died 2 years later from what we now think was Lou Gehrig's disease. He built a studio in their small house and property in Biloxi. Dusty had taken some lessons with him, and after he died, she decided to become a dedicated artist, which she did. And in those early years, 1936 to 39, she produced a remarkable body of work, as you can see in the book, very quickly evolving through naturalistic styles and often painting scenes around Biloxi, and then moved into a more surrealist and abstract phase in the 40s and 50s. But she was very talented, had her first show in New York in 1939, and became very much a part of the New York art world.
Looking through this book, I would never say it was the same artist from page to page because it's such different genres of work. Was she noted for or most popular for a specific kind of painting?
I think she was probably best known, especially in the day, as an abstract expressionist painter, and that's why many people do think of her and like to think about her. What I tried to do with the book was to show a much broader spread of her life and her career and how she got to that period, evolving in the 30s and 40s. And then after that, in the 70s and 80s, when she was in her own 70s and 80s, she kept on working, used a variety of materials and styles, still had a show in New York, and worked often in the New Orleans art world. She connected the Gulf Coast, Mississippi, and the Orleans art scene quite a bit. So she did have a variety of styles, and she was very experimental in how she approached those styles. And from what I've learned, she did not want to get locked into being typecast as one form or one type of artist.
Do you know what it was or why she changed genres in the 40s and 50s?
She'd been in New York. She had been very attached through Archie into the art world. She knew what was happening in the American scene and regionalism then, and what was emerging was a strong interest in surrealism. And after the war, when America, New York especially, became the world art center, she knew what the style was, and abstraction was where the world was going, and she went with it. And she made a strong mark, proving that as an independent woman from Mississippi, she could hold her own with many of the major artists at the Parsons Gallery, and they were the major artists. And was, again, part of that art world, but independent in her own way, wanting to have her own voice, her own style.
Are there artists who credit her with inspiration or influence?
There are. There are many. Even George Dunbar, who was a major figure in New Orleans, talked about how Dusty helped bring his art to other people's attention. And Dusty, in her 70s and 80s, was very active in encouraging the development in Ocean Springs and Biloxi of an art scene. And there were a number of artists there who told me how influenced they were and how open she was with them and talking about her art, encouraging their art, and helping them as they advanced.
Well, as you mentioned, this book is chock full of her work, and as I said, it's so eclectic, really beautiful. The book is called Dusty Bonjay, Art and Life, Biloxi, New Orleans, New York. We've been speaking with the author, J. Richard Gruber, Director Emeritus at the Ogden Museum of Southern Art. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you, Karen.